Welcome everyone to the Energy Revolution podcast produced by CHERP Locally Grown Power. And today I'm really excited that we get to interview Kent Kernahan, the prolific inventor that I met 5 years ago, who has come up with an idea for an extraordinary project called Locally Grown Power that you'll all be hearing a lot more about. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Kent because he is the intellectual property and the patent and the business model behind our entire endeavor. So Kent, thanks for coming on the call today. I wanted to tell everybody a little bit about you, and that is that you are what's known as a prolific inventor, which means to date, you have about 74 US patents to your name, the last 2 of which have been focused on revolutionizing the deployment of solar. And I'm just very excited to be talking with you. Everybody should know that we've now been in relationship with Kent for about the last 5 years. And I have come to know Kent as a friend, and I admire you very much for all the things that you have created around this project. So welcome to the podcast, Kent.
Well, thank you. And, you know, gifted architects and inadequate engineers can do great things together.
I would like to cut to the chase and really have us talk today a little bit about the overall strategy for locally grown power and our contribution to the energy revolution. And I think I'd like to start today with the concept of why we're doing this as a nonprofit venture. You and I, in the last 5 years, in describing what our model is as we roll out solar panels in a nonprofit business model, the first question that people really come up with ultimately is, why would you do this in a nonprofit business model? Why don't you just go sell this intellectual property, which we'll be getting to in a minute, but this intellectual property that has the opportunity to dramatically change solar for the world? Why don't you just sell this to venture capital and sell out and have them monetize it overseas like the normal business model? So I'd like to give you an opportunity to answer that question. Why the nonprofit business model?
Well, thanks. You know, in the United States, we have 2 mechanisms for realizing products and services. We have the for-profit model, C corporations, LLCs, and things like that. We have the nonprofit businesses, which are really corporations for the social welfare, the 501c3s and 501c4s. In other societies, we do this in a command kind of a structure. So they'll have their for-profit sector, which operate in the interests of their investors. And then they'll have the command economy section, the Central Committee of the Communist Party in China, for example. Here in the United States, what we've done is really capture the genius of choice. So what we do is we allow for our larger foundations and very large taxpayers to make decisions about where they want to spend their tax dollars in a strategic way. So of course we have some things that are done by the government sector, and those are done in a political, bureaucratic way, if you will. And then we have things that are done by foundations and large taxpayers, and they make decisions that are strategic to the society that they live in. And so nonprofits are created as a sector of the tax code and the corporations code to allow us to do that. Now, what really hasn't happened until locally grown power is we have never armed up our nonprofits with state-of-the-art intellectual property. So while there's been great innovation in research, you know, March of Dimes and the excellent work on cancer and that sort of thing, and services, there really hasn't been access to the cutting edge kinds of products that exist for the venture capital the C corporation part of our economy. So what we've done here is provide that state-of-the-art cutting-edge technology in a field that can directly benefit our communities to the part of our economy that is the nonprofit sector, that it has its mission to benefit communities to the maximum extent. So we're just doing this in the American way, as you will, as opposed to the more directive structure that you see in some of the other societies that we compete with.
It's been a fascinating journey to me, having come from the for-profit sector and running my company for 35 years as a for-profit company, starting a nonprofit. I had no idea at the beginning of the power that can be leveraged as a nonprofit entity. So for example, as we're getting ready to launch this factory, we have now as a nonprofit the opportunity to get donated materials to us. We have the opportunity to get donated leases to us for the factory. We have the opportunity for donated labor and donated professional services, all of which drive down the cost of these panels, allowing us to create more panels to distribute more of them in the low-income sector. So it's been an extraordinary journey for me to kind of understand that this really is the way to compete with China and other countries for cost of materials and cost of goods for the factory.
Yeah, it's really a tremendous thing. If you think about it on the for-profit side, it's a very more sanitized, black and white decision, what will get us the highest rate of return. And this kind of a calculation will force even our otherwise well-meaning, private equity funds to require that our inventions be monetized in Asia, because they're responsible, their fiduciary duty is to their investors who are demanding the lowest risk, highest rate of return. Because that's the way those funds and that's the way those corporations are structured. Nonprofits, on the other hand, their first goal is to their mission, to provide that service to their community. And what that enables is all like-minded individuals that have that same priority because they live there, because they believe in this case in, say, carbon mitigation or local job creation, or stimulating their local economy, because all of those constituencies can express themselves through the community nonprofit. We have a very rich universe, if you will, supply chain ecosystem that can support us and lift us up in ways that we don't even know in the beginning. It's happened several times through this program that we've gotten resources and assets that we just couldn't even dream were possible. I remember at one point, the first building that you were given access to wasn't sufficient. And in the space of 15 minutes, it was more or less, oh, you need something else? Okay, we'll give you a piece of this mall. That kind of thing is just unheard of in a private equity deal with, leases and negotiations and all of that stuff. So it's been very rewarding for me as well, and astonishing in some ways.
One of the other astonishing aspects of the nonprofit model that I didn't appreciate when we first started this was this actual partnership between government and local programs. The way that we've structured our tax code is that local people can decide to spend tax dollars in hyper-localized ways. And the reason this nonprofit structure has been blessed by the tax code is that the federal government recognizes that local entities and local organizations are better at running locally focused programs than the federal or state government would be. So it's this kind of extraordinary partnership that we have been able to maximize, which gives local control to local programs, which is one of the things we'll be talking about a little bit later, as one of the values to help local communities develop their own particular personalities and programs?
Yeah, it's one of those concepts that is completely non-ideological. I think you can go across the entire spectrum of people in elected office or people in their community, and if given the option to run a program locally for the benefit of that community, or to have it directed from a command basis from thousands of miles away, they'll always choose that. I'm speaking to you today from Corvallis, Montana, population about 960. One of the reddest of the red states. Local control is a huge thing here. Mm-hmm. And so this value proposition really cuts across kind of all of the constituencies. If you go to anyone and say, we're doing something for your local community, for your local school, for your local displaced workers, whatever, you're going to get a positive reaction. And that's why programs like Habitat for Humanity are just sort of the benchmark for tremendous community achievement. And we hope to make this program the same thing.
After you decided that all of your inventions would heretofore be deployed in a nonprofit business model, what was it that turned you then to solar and the discovery of the elimination of hotspots as your next invention to deploy in this nonprofit business model?
Yeah, it's worth setting a little bit of foundation here. One of the things that I think is an untapped resource in our country is our inventor class. We are responsible for 60% of the intellectual property and 4% of the population, demonstrably an innovative part, of the American spirit. However, we have not really brought that to bear in our nonprofit sector. And so what you're seeing here is economics and business model seamlessly integrated with product development. The business model actually came first, and then I set about to solve a particular problem that would be in service of that. Solar creates an annuity kind of an impact, and so by doing something that can be manufactured in the same community where it can be installed and then where it can ultimately be monetized over decades for a single act of construction and installation, we get the maximum leverage, the maximum economic gain. So the question is, why solar? Well, this is a great thing as an example of what you can do, of the power of taking our kind of standard issue inventor class, business class that would ordinarily be applied to private equity, and then apply that full tilt, best talent we can to the nonprofit sector to create the maximum impact. And we hope this is going to be a template for other inventors and other nonprofits in even other industrial spaces, in agriculture and medicine, construction. You can imagine the possibilities where we don't only view that we can monetize things on Sand Hill Road with our investor class, but we can do things with our community engagement class in nonprofits.
So it makes a lot of sense to me that you would choose solar because of its annuity capabilities. A little money spent on year one will give back multiple times over a 30 to 40 year time span. And so there's tremendous leverage there. Now, once you've decided on that particular industry for the annuity aspect, and then also for decarbonization and other reasons that renewable energy are helpful, why and how did you land on hotspots as the problem to solve?
Okay, so in order to create a competitive advantage, no matter what the enterprise, you have to solve a kind of a compelling fundamental problem that will last. And it turns out that solar power has a big one caused by a misunderstanding. The fact that as Einstein originally understood it and documented it in 1905 with his law of photoelectric effect, photoelectric devices are power converters. As power converters, they should be getting cooler as they convert power. Sunlight falls, it gets pulled away, the temperature goes down. In fact, there has been an accepted wisdom that solar power should get very hot because it's exposed to the sun. But it's not an engine, it shouldn't, it should have gotten cooler. This misunderstanding has existed for over 70 years. And what that has led to is an engineering cycle of ever higher purity, ever higher perfection, trying to drive this heat out of solar, when in fact the problem isn't the solar cells or photovoltaics, it's the architecture of the solar panel and the way that we actually extract the power from the solar cells. And so by seeing a fundamental problem that could be solved in a simple way, then that unravels a lot of the technological complexity of solar power and gives our nonprofit 501c3 factories a huge competitive advantage. In fact, a kind of an insurmountable technological advantage of the kind that we have each time we have a revolutionary step in new technologies. But in this case, we're contributing that revolutionary step to the nonprofit sector and giving it a, kind of a, at least initially, unbeatable franchise on something that they can outcompete the largest corporations with, because essentially they're solving a fundamental problem. And by the definition of intellectual property, the larger corporation does not have access to solve that problem. Then the business model that can be deployed with solar, that is the hyper-local business model, gives a next layer of armor to that nonprofit because of its engagement with the local city political community and the community organizers and the businesses. At a certain point, if you want to compete with that, not only do you need the technological advantage, but then you have to bring the point of use manufacturing technology into the community in order to displace the community nonprofits. So it becomes very, very difficult to not become a community nonprofit if you really want to compete with this technology. And that was the basic idea, to shift everything into the playing field of the community nonprofits and away from the large multinational lights out billion-dollar factories.
Yeah, this is very exciting to me to watch. In the very beginning, when you were teaching me about hotspots, it became obvious in our conversations with other solar people in this country. Many people had never heard of hotspots and didn't even understand it was a problem because essentially we don't have a solar manufacturing industry in the United States. We have a sales and installation industry in the United States around solar. And so the problem of hotspots has been backpedaled and downplayed to the point that most people in the solar industry never even knew it was a problem, because it has been a problem that's plagued the silicon solar cell since 1941 when it was first deployed. And solving that problem is a fundamental shift in the way solar panels can be made. And I've come to really appreciate the reason that you focused on hotspots. And by your patent that eliminates hotspots in solar cells, it radically simplifies the panel architecture as well, allowing us to bring back all of these middle-class manufacturing jobs and be able to manufacture these panels locally because they've become simpler and less expensive. Because of this technology, we can reduce tolerances and we can reduce materials and parts, and these panels will be less expensive. And then when we pile on the nonprofit business model and be able to utilize donated materials and other leverage kind of resources available to us as a nonprofit, this allows us now to be completely competitive with our solar panels being produced inside local city centers on the world market. Extremely exciting to me. And so maybe we could switch to how we met and taking the idea of the nonprofit and these two patents that you created around hotspots and the deployment through CHERP, locally grown power, and what's your perspective on our relationship?
Yeah, Devin, just to close out that last section, the industry is aware of it now. The Solar Power International show that just concluded was full of technologies for attempting to deal with hotspot concentrating cracks and defects, and robots that wash, and fleets of drones that image, and how many millions of dollars can be recovered in lost electricity by working this issue. And so there has been a blossoming awareness within the last, I'd say 2 years, where the problem was virtually denied as an existent problem prior to that point.
Great point.
So we're in the right place because we started in 2011 understanding something that was a fundamental problem, but the industry is well aware.
Not to mention the recent lawsuits against Tesla from Walmart for 7 of their buildings burning down because of hotspots.
Yes, but even before that, there was the huge Deaton-Watson fire in New Jersey, where the local firefighters concluded they could not fight the fire because the panels could not, generate a safe environment on the rooftop. Another thing that we addressed in idealPVs. So it's been going on and simmering in the background, but it really has only, come to the fore in terms of awareness in the industry in the last couple of years.
So for our listeners, if you want to learn more about hotspots, feel free to tune into our website, CHERPLGP.org. And we have a lot of more information on the website about the technology and hotspots. So what about our partnership, Kent, in terms of focusing on why were you deciding to deploy all of this through CHERP?
Yeah. So in the same way that we needed the right technological product for this model, we also needed the right first nonprofit partner. And if you think about nonprofits, they're as diverse as the for-profit world in terms of the breadth of services that they're engaged with. So we knew that it had to be involved in building sciences, so that narrows the field. We knew that it had to exist for some time and have a regular board of directors and a regularly constituted relationship with its community, needed to be successful, needed to understand logistics and be able to deploy something like a factory and a workforce to install the technologies. And so we kind of set upon a nationwide search, and there were, several almost right kinds of organizations, but this was one where when you see it, you know it. And so when I met Devin Hartman and I had looked into his organizations, my goodness, his community holds parades in his organization's honor. He is an architect that realized that buildings were themselves the largest source of greenhouse gases and pollution, and completely changed his career trajectory. And then, this unparalleled success with building energy retrofits and organizing volunteers and engaging the community, and even, the analytics that existed within the organization at that time. So there were the building blocks for being able to do this. And then when the very first meeting was organized, it was with the mayor of the city at City Hall, and they went through and suffered a very technical and long presentation that was heavy on science and math and engineering that probably didn't really play, but also had, in-depth financial analysis and that sort of thing. So their ability to just engage and recognize that this was the right thing for their community, that cemented this as just, the right choice at the right time.
Well, from my perspective too, it's been a joy to have met you and to incorporate this into our overarching energy retrofit project. And we've now come to call the locally grown power factory project our capstone project, because we're focused still on engaging the community, retrofitting buildings for energy efficiency, because we always want to reduce wasted energy first. But now this allows us to, as a capstone project to our entire suite of offerings for each city, the ability to create a local factory to make locally grown solar panels, so that we can, once we've reduced the energy through retrofits, we can then produce the rest and help take a city down to net zero energy, which has been our goal from the very beginning. So one of the things, maybe what we could do is spend just a couple minutes, Kent, talking about this whole model and what this opens, the opportunities that this opens up to us. One of the taglines that we've been using for CHERP locally grown power is sustainable energy and sustainable economics. Because once we have control over manufacturing and we start creating jobs, both in the factory and both in the construction side for the installation of these panels, the local economic, regenerative economic impacts of a project like this become very large. So maybe you could talk just a little bit about that in terms of what are all the benefits.
Yeah, so let's start at the source. Photons are the most highly organized form of energy we have, and entropy, heat being the lowest. And photons are completely democratic. They fall across all of the rooftops and all of the land every day without, regard to, who lives there or what's going on in that place. And so by converting these photons to electrons that we can use in our technologies in our homes, we're satisfying a hierarchy of need that we need as human beings to function and as a pillar of our society. That is an unmonetized resource. We are redirecting something that would have generated waste heat. We would not have known that it was an asset, and put it directly into our community and then done it in the most economically efficient way possible. You suddenly take an unrealized, untapped resource, be it photons or workforces that were underutilized, and you throw them into your local economy is going to grow. It has no other place to go because you're filling up that balloon with something of value. We're switching from shipping dollars out to burn them each day for our daily energy, to keeping those dollars within that local community and using them to provide value-add goods and services within the community. So it's very, very high. Our initial financial analysis showed that we should have something like about a 4.4 gain. When this was finally done in a formal way using the best available models and access through our partners at the Southern California Association of Governments and very, very sophisticated financial services model or financial models that are used for everything from shopping malls to airports to stadiums, I believe the multiplication factor was about 7. This is, an extremely high gain. And at the top line, those very high net worth individuals, large value foundations, and the government itself, their businesses rise and fall based on the overall performance of the economy. So from that point of view, that is the input end to nonprofits, this is a very, very easy justification. And I think that's why we see the state of California having a targeted appropriation for this particular factory to stand up this first program being a relatively easy thing to do. When you've got all of the analytics behind you and the economics, this is what happens.
Yeah, and it's getting very exciting. Like you say, we just got the line item budget assignment from the California state budget to start this factory. Um, I would like to invite everybody who's listening in to stay tuned. We're going to be doing many podcasts on various aspects of the topics that we've started to cover here today. And one of the things that you might be watching for coming up is our focus on environmental justice. The panels coming out of this factory, the first panels will be to deploy solar panels on the lowest household income households first, the lowest income households first, as an ability to divert money going from those households to the utilities back into the local economy, which is another way that we will be focusing on regenerating the economics of local communities. So our focus is environmental justice, mitigation of greenhouse gases, and a regenerative economic model for local cities. We're getting very excited right now that we're getting close to opening the very first factory in Pomona, and that will be the pilot project for replication in other cities around Southern California.